We're live. This may throw the camera off. Hold on. It's my camshaft. I'm not afraid to use it. Excuse me. So today we're going to talk about. I have a thumbnail up. Pushrod length, particularly on an LS. It works kind of the same on other what I would call non-adjustable valve trains. So you would either have to. Sometimes guys like on the 5-liter Ford stuff, they would shim the rocker stands, which you can't really do on the LS stuff. Well, I take that back. You could shim the rocker stands and bring them up if you really wanted to do that. But you'd be changing. You might be changing the contact pattern on the lifter too if you did that. Normally, the route is the rocker is in a fixed bolt down position. And so if you change the base circle, so let's talk about, first of all, why you would need to change the pushrod length. So from a factory one, you don't need to. It's already scienced out for you. And the nice thing about this is there's some leeway in the factory stuff because there's going to be some production variances in what the optimum pushrod length is, or what is acceptable, or what they'll run. Most of the factory stuff is very, very close, and so we have near a 7.4. I know guys are going to say, "Oh, it's actually 7.397 or whatever their number is." It doesn't matter. A few thousandths is not in what we're calling the pushrod length has no effect on anything, and in fact, the variation in the deck thickness, how they milled the machine, the thing for the tower, the discrepancies or the differences in the tower, in the cam, or in the rocker stands themselves, all of that stuff is going to change it by a few thousand, certainly. But the reason that you would adjust pushrod length after you get from the factory stuff is if you excuse me, if you change it from the factory specs. So if you change the camshaft, if you change the pushrod, if you change the rockers, and a lot of guys don't realize, if you change the cylinder head. Because if you change the cylinder head and you change the distance from the facing of the deck surface of the head to where the rocker stand mounts, and assuming that the rocker stand stays the same, sometimes with a lot of heads, aftermarket heads, they have their own rocker stands, like they have billet rocker stands. Some of the heads accept the factory stuff. But either way, if you change any of that, if you mill your heads, same thing. You change the necessary pushrod length. It might not be a big deal. And the reason that that's the case is because your motor will... Man, this just starts when I start doing the live feed. I was fine all day. But the pushrod length that you can run, that your motor will run with, there's a big acceptable range there. So I go by the way that I look at it. I go by the number of turns that you have preload on the lifter, because on a hydraulic roller lifter, you don't have lash. So some guys might be used to setting lash with a solid lifter or a solid roller deal, where you use feeler gauges and stuff. If you've got Hondas or a lot of these aftermarket, or not aftermarket, but some of these import deals where they have solid deals, and then you use a feeler gauge to put 5 or 6 or 4 thousandths lash in it, whatever it is. If it's a big block Chevy or small block Chevy, it might be 15 or 20 thousandths lash. But you don't have any lash in either a hydraulic flat tappet or a hydraulic roller camshaft. So there's no lash. In fact, there's the reverse of lash. So there's lash going the other way. You're actually preloading the lifter. And the way that you do that is with pushrod length. So what you do is you bolt down the pushrod. And then what I do is I look at, there comes a point that's called zero lash. So the zero lash is when your lifter is pumped up, and this is very important. The lifter must be pumped up. It must be full of oil. And the lifter cup must be all the way at the top. If you push it down, it's pretty hard to get it to stay down there because it has a return spring in it anyways. But if the pushrod cup is all the way up And then when the push rod is touching that lifter is touching the cam, it's got to be touching the cam on what we're going to call the heel of the cam. And so the heel of the cam, like, let's take this one right here. So that's the lobe. That's not the heel. The heel would be the other side, the small side. And actually the heel, you can see this black mark right here. So see this black mark right here? So that's still heel. That's still the heel all the way there. And the heel is all the way around, all the way around, all the way around to right there. If you measure that camshaft basically is the same distance off of the base circle all the way around there. Only when you get to the lobe part of it, the big part that opens the valve, that's where you can't adjust it. On everything else, I know that they tell you to do it when this one opens and when this one closes, but the reality again is you have a lot of room as long as when you're what I do is I rotate the motor. So when you're rotating the motor and you can put your finger on the push rod or hold the push rod, you're rotating the motor. As soon as that push rod goes down to its lowest position, that's it. It's not going to change at all. It's not going to change at all from there because you've come down to the bottom side of the camshaft until you come all the way around and you start going on the upside of the camshaft. So all of that can be adjusted. And so what we look at is when it's in that position, the lifter is going to be touching the heel of the camshaft. Heel of our camshaft is going to be touching right there. The lifter will be touching that. The lifter will be riding on that. Or the lifter will be touching that. The push rod will be in contact with the lifter. And then the rocker will be in contact with the push rod. And then the other end of the rocker, the tip of the rocker, will also be in contact with the valve. So when that happens, when when you're tightening the bolt down, tighten the rocker bolt down, when all of those things come in contact with each other, that's zero lash. So now the number of turns to tighten that thing all the way down, because the LS rockers have a positive stop. So they have a little receiver cup, and then the rocker goes into that stand, and then you tighten that down, and you're basically pushing the push rod down, and that's pushing the plunger down on the lifter. And how many ever turns it takes to go from that zero lash point where everything's in contact with each other down to where the rocker bolt is tight. That's how I determine how much preload it has. And the safe zone is anywhere from, we'll say a quarter, but I would like more like a half a turn of preload, a half a turn to a turn and a half of preload. And so, okay, Richard, why do you have that range? Why do you have a half a turn to 1.5 turns? Well, on both sides of that, you can run into problems. I've run them with a quarter turn as long as you're really precise about what's going on with the lifter. Some short travel lifters actually cannot get away with anywhere near that many turns. Some of them have to be very precise on how much because they don't have a lot of movement. A factory lifter has a lot of movement. In fact, you can put 2 turns, probably 2.5 turns in it, but we're going to talk about what happens when you try to do that. So I've run stuff with a quarter turn, and you can. The problem is you get to the point where you don't have enough preload in the lifter. I don't think the lifter works as well. And also you get to the point where you start getting closer to the point where you actually have lash, and you don't want to have that. And also the lifter works a lot better with more preload. We showed a test where we ran pushrod length, and the longer pushrod length actually works better, because what you do is on a full travel lifter, when you push the pushrod down with a longer pushrod, when you push the plunger down on the lifter with a longer pushrod, you get rid of a bunch of aerated oil that's in there. And so you've made the lifter more precise by having less flexibility in there. You like that flexibility? By having less flexibility in there, by having less aerated oil in there. And so you've made a standard travel lifter act more like a short travel lifter, which it is trying to act more like a solid lifter. So there's no give at all. And when there's no give at all, that's why you have to put lash in it. But on a hydraulic roller and on a short travel lifter, there's very, very little preload on it, because there's very little movement in that lifter. But that's good. The thing is more precise that way. But for the factory stuff, half a turn to 1.5 turns. So on a half turn, you're just getting too close to having lash. So that's why I like to have some safety margin there. 1.5 turns, and everywhere in between there, half, 3/4, 1, 1.25, 1.5, all that's good. If you go beyond 1.5 turns on a factory long travel, standard travel lifter, where you start getting into is having too much preload on the lifter. If you have too much preload on the lifter, like let's say you go to 2 turns, sometimes I've had problems at 2 turns which is why I stay away from that. If you go to 2 turns, what will happen is the lifter will pump up, especially when you get more oil pressure in it, and the lifter will pump up and will just hang the valve open. If you do it where the push rod is too long and hangs the valve open, even on startup, the motor just won't start. It won't make any compression because the valves are open, and so it won't work. It can also do that not when you first start the motor, but when it reaches a given oil pressure. So that becomes problematic. That's why I like that half turn to 1.5 turns. And I know guys are going to ask, well, which one of those is better? There isn't a better one. That's the safety range. You could be anywhere in there. Like I said, I myself would like the ideal thing is that if you're racing, to have a short travel lifter, adjust it so that it's precise, make the push rod length, and then you have to play a lot of games with push rod lengths, because you might have to get push rods custom made that are in between available shelf sizes. A lot of times you can make it work with shelf sizes, and you could configure other things to make it work. But and so when you're doing that, you have to make sure that that's worth it. Like if you're building a race motor and you're going to those levels of building, then you have to do that stuff. You go get a junkyard LS, you don't need any of that. You just put push rods on it. In fact, just run the push rods that are in it, and it will work just fine. You need to ask, if you're buying a camshaft, did the cam manufacturer, this one's kind of destroyed. That's why it's on the display shelf. Plus I have the cool demonstration deal here. You need to make sure, or you need to ask them, the people that manufacture the cams, did you change the base circle? If you change the base circle, you may have to change the push rod length. The thing is, if it changes a little bit and you're still within that range and it changed in the right direction, you're probably still okay. For years and years and years, I just never even checked anything. We just put it in there, and it was always okay until it wasn't. And then we started paying attention to that. And lucky for me, it was not a LASH situation. It was a situation where the push rods were too long and the motor wouldn't start. And then all you have to do is you back them out and then try to start it. And anything fires right up, we're like, oh yeah, that tells us what's going on. And so that's why you do push rod length, and that's how you adjust it. You do that on an LS. On some other stuff where you can adjust the push rod length, you have to do it by the contact pattern on the valve tip. And then you would adjust other things, not normally the push rod length. You could adjust, well, you can adjust the push rod length. Let's see. You would also adjust, and the way that we do it on other applications, I've done this with LS stuff too, but I like doing it with a regular push rod. Usually if you have a factory push rod and you do this test, it will give you an idea what to do. Okay, oh, I only got a quarter turn, or I didn't even get 1 turn and the thing's still loose. You need a longer push rod because you got lash in it. Oh, I went to 2 turns or 3 turns. Well, that's way too long. You need to go the other direction. So it gives you a really good idea. So you don't have to have a whole bunch of push rods to test this on. A lot of times we will use on other applications where we're not actually compressing the valve or compressing the lifter, we'll use a test push rod that's adjustable. So it's adjustable. We could put it at the right height. And all I do for stuff like that, for stuff that has adjustable rockers, like a small block Chevy, a big block Chevy, small block Ford, all those things, I'll just get it on the heel of the cam again. And this is just a quickie test. So I get it on the heel of the cam. What I'll do is adjust the push rod length so that with the lifter on the heel of the cam, we'll adjust the push rod length. I'll put the rocker on. We'll use a Sharpie or a dry erase marker, or you can use the Dicom blue stuff on the tip of the valve. And when I put the rocker on, I'll put the rocker on again so there's 0 lash. And what I do is wiggle the tip of the rocker back and forth across the valve tip and then go, look. And this is just a static thing. So then I go, look, okay, it has a centered contact pattern in this configuration. That's going to get me close. Then I will test that with a push rod length, an actual push rod, because what I want to do now is, again, I would go ahead and mark the tip, valve tip, put a push rod in there, and then I would rotate the motor around. And sometimes I'll even do it with oil pressure. We'll run a drill and spin the oil pump to make sure the push rod has oil pressure. So we'll spin it over by hand, and then we'll check the dynamic pattern on the valve tip, and hopefully it's centered and hopefully it's the right width. So you want it to be, fairly wide so you can see it, and you want it to be centered. If it's too far out away from the rocker, then the push rod's too long. If it's too far toward the rocker, the contact pattern on the valve tip is too close to the rocker, that means the push rod's too short, and then you can adjust it accordingly. It's once you've done it once or twice, just like everything else, pretty easy to do. So that's how we do that. Let's see what you guys are doing. Have you ever adjusted valves or push rod length? Okay. So I was also thinking about reading you guys one of the questions that I had. Yeah, I'm actually going to read this. I want you guys to answer this. So this is a question I got from a guy. He said that he watches the videos, which is great. Thank you for doing that. He's looking at a VS Racing 7875 turbo, good turbo. I've run those a lot. Think about purchasing a kit for a 5.7 Hemi Challenger. A guy on Facebook is offering a kit for $3,500 minus the downpipes. He charges $200 for fender exits, $450 for piping to the factory exhaust. All I'd need is fuel injectors, pump, and tune. I also factored in doing a cam upgrade from the 292, the later motor. Talking to a tuner, said the factory cam would definitely cause higher boost. The milder cam would be more restrictive, basically. So he wants to know is the kit includes the 7875, a 60 millimeter wastegate, a 60 millimeter blow off valve, a 3-inch front mounted intercooler, 3-inch piping, couplers, clamps, oil lines, and boost gauge. So what do you guys think about $3,500 for that stuff? And he's talking about other things that he has to buy also. But what do you guys think about that price for those things on for this Hemi? And then I'll tell you what I told him. We'll see what you guys think. So you can help me answer stuff. Car peeps. Texas is in the house. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. I'm gonna move my camshaft down so it doesn't fall and drop on my foot. Man, that would not be fun. Can't stay long. Bigfoot, what's up? Picked up a wrecked Chevy 2500, the L96 6-liter. Nice. 6L90 trans. Do you have horsepower and torque changes due to pushrod length? Yes, I do. I had that video is up. You can check out the pushrod length video. Burns, you have some dyno time lined up. Let me know what happens. How different in base circle is reasonable among all lobes on a cam? The lobes are not going to change much. The whole base circle of the cam is what's going to change. I did the turn method with stock push rods, 7.4, rechecked everything, found the stock push rod was worn and one brand new lifter was collapsed. Nice. It's good, but it's good to check that stuff. If you're doing a junkyard motor, one of the things I look at is we like to look at the push rod, the ends of the push rods, both ends. Usually the rocker end is the bad one. And then look at that rocker cup too. Take the rocker off, turn it over, and look inside it. And if it's all shiny, that means it's worn. And if you look at the attending push rod, chances are the push rod is also worn. So it's been run without oil, started up, whatever, has lots of miles on it. And what will happen is that sometimes they get so bad that they get kind of football shaped, what people call it. Excuse me. So they get worn out so bad. Not a bad idea to replace those. And by replace those, I mean just put new junkyard ones in. Tuned an 05 LS2 stick shift vet. Nice. I like the LS2s. I need a shot of something. Can you take some of that variance out in LASH? Not on a non-adjustable valve train. You can't. Just got my new welder and grinder picked up yesterday, so tomorrow's cleaning out the garage. Nice. Changed my heads, milled to 9-inch. Adjustable roller rockers, new roller cam. I'm going to have to order custom push rods. Do you have a 9-inch deck height now? Is that what you're talking about? My Armor 20 is 16,000 slash hot both sides. It seems like a lot, actually, for an import cam. I know that the Honda stuff's not anywhere near that much. Although I think the specs that they give you in the manuals are cold lash. So it's always a good day when you get new toys. Harbor Freight was having a parking lot sale. Those are always good to go to. Been all day with the Red Bull skydiving team. City proximity flying and building base jumping. That's cool. Were you doing that, James? Respect, man. Saw a race engine by Honda, I think it was, and it was a V8 or V6 single turbo that they only ran the turbo off of one bank of cylinders. Have you ever tried? Yeah, I have tried that, and Saab did that on their production motors. I usually do each cylinder individually, putting each at top dead center end of the compression stroke. Like I said, it doesn't matter on the camshaft. Once you go down on the heel of the cam, it doesn't change. Speaking of lifters, is a good reliable alternative to Johnson for less money. I don't know about the less money thing. The Isky lifters are really good. Has Richard tested symmetric versus asymmetric cams? Do you mean single pattern versus dual pattern, or do you mean the actual load profile, the opening ramp and the closing ramp? You got to let me know what you mean. I always run a lot of preload and plenty of valve spring. If your lifter pumps up, you lost control of the valve. So we're going to change the distributor gear. I don't know. I don't know if Summit changes the base circle. You'd have to ask them. That's one thing I don't know. I don't know what the base circle is, and I think that the base circle on all of the factory cams is not the same. At least I've been told that. And I don't know what the base circle is of like Summit's cams and Brian Toohey's cams and Texas Bead cams. And thinking about running methanol for my dyno run. The injector calculation says I need 2,400 cc's at 80% duty. I have 2,200s. Yes, because you also don't have to run 80% duty cycle. 2,200s is more than enough for 400 at the wheel. I did what you said the other night and ran what you want, and being 42 degrees across the board at 13 PS, it didn't go well. No, I think we tried to talk you out of running 42 degrees. That's not good. It's terrible. That's way too much. By like orders of magnitude. How about cycloidal cams? there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, but again, it's not. And I would actually be kind of curious to see if the lobes are truly symmetrical anyway on some of these grinds. The load profile. Philip, I'd have to look into why they actually do that. Maybe they're wanting stability in the lobe. Maybe maybe they're trying to cure a bounce problem or something on the backside. But it's not something that you would need to do for the kinds of things that we're talking about. James, not me, a couple of friends, and they invited me to join them. Ground team, getting extra landing shots. Cool. No, a knee injury. Cool. When are we going to see the Truck Norris cam in a 6-liter? Do you think it's going to do something different than a 6-liter? Are Cam Motion's tie bar lifters reliable? They're around $500. I've never run them, but Steve makes pretty good stuff over there. If you mill a set of LS heads, a significant amount I found shimming the pedestals creates a better white pattern on the valves. Why would that be? The valve is still going to bolt down to the head, and the distance between that bolt down point and the tip of the valve is exactly the same. It's not going to change. How does it change the tip pattern? Because you can't change the tip pattern by changing rocker ratio on a fixed bolt down rocker. I know, because I had this question a long time ago for Brian. Burns, why did you order asymmetrical cams? I mean, asymmetrical lobe cams. $60,000 preload is right under 1 turn on a stock LS rocker. Is it correct? 1 turn is fine. Yeah. How much valve preload? How much lifter preload? It's enough on the larger push rod. The lifter preload is not going to be affected by push rod size. I will. A champ. I'll have to try it. Have you ever had an oil aeration issue causing intermittent lifter noise? I think that that's possible. I don't know that I've ever had that. The Morels say 60,000s. Is that a short travel lifter or a standard travel lifter? So, Mark, you had good luck with the Mellings lifters? Richard, how much ring gap do I need? 6,500 per 1 inch of bore. Yeah, they're not crickets, they're frogs. That's what you were asking, James. With heads milled 60 to 80,000s. Who would mill an LS head 80,000s? Mark. 216, 220, 2800 will be enough. And what size motor is it, Mark? Richard, when do you need to go with push rods thicker than 80 thousandths wall? I don't know. I haven't yet done that. I've talked to Brian Tooley about this, and they've run 3/8 push rods, and I'm like, why, why, why do you think you need to do that? And especially when you can go from an 80 wall to a 125/16 push rod. And I did a test of 80 thousandths to 120 wall push rods, and there was no change in power. So at the, it's a cammed LS deal. So, and also I'm not running it at 8,500 RPM. So maybe with lots of spring pressure, because I would think you would get more deflection from more spring pressure and more RPM because you'd have frequency changes. So maybe there's something there. I didn't see it in the test that I did. Burns, I was told it would make everything last longer on my valve train. And then I was at that level. Is it normal for short travel lifters to be noisier than stock? I think I've only run short travel lifters 2 or 3 times on the engine dyno on some of the things that we did. And honestly, it's hard for us to tell. We can't really hear lifter noise on the dyno because we have an open exhaust. Uh-oh, you got a cathedral size hole in your block. Philip, which changes usually cause the need for pushrod measuring and subsequent swaps? We went over those. Milling the head, changing the base circle of the cam or our big ones. I don't know if the Morels I don't know if that part number is a short travel lifter or not. I don't know that I ever run Morels in anything. Maybe big blocks a long time ago, but I've never run them in an LS. Just got my first project car. It's getting a B18. I've been doing research online, seen plenty of them where the head will have stock cams, but a set of titanium springs and retainers. I don't know why you would need that with stock cams. Quite honestly, the stock cam, you're not running enough engine speed where a titanium retainer would be beneficial by having the lightweight valve train. Usually titanium retainers are part of another spring upgrade. And sometimes they have titanium retainers that go with that spring. And that would make sense because maybe the spring package that they're putting in there isn't the same as stock. So the retainer won't work. So the way that they're seating the spring, it needs a dedicated retainer. But usually that's done when you put camshafts in. What I just realized is we're talking V8 LSs and not Integra LS. Yeah, and the Integra LS, which we can talk about. I wrote a couple of books on Honda stuff too, but there's no hydraulic, there's no lash adjustment on an Integra motor. It's essentially a solid lifter. It's an overhead cam, so it has lash. So I think it was 6 or 8 thousandths on the Honda stuff, if I remember right. It's either 3 or 4 or 6 or 8, 6 and 8. What's the most choppy LS stock cam? None of them are going to be really choppy. Probably LS2 or 3 or 6, one of those. Brought my 6-year Power Stroke heads to be milled due to blown head gaskets. Found that they had been milled previously when the truck had no compression when all the valves were hung open. Yep. GM Performance Cadillac lifters are absolutely essential for your high performance LS build. So there's somebody telling you to run Cadillac lifters. Just join the stream. Welcome. Short travel lifters on my stroked LQ4. Got preload between 1/4 to 3/4 of a turn. What did you use shims on? Did you shims under the rocker stands? Just putting a better valve spring in is often an improvement. Don't think I've seen an improvement in power from just a spring change. We have seen a decrease in power from stock stuff. Unless you cure a valve float issue, then that's definitely a change in power. Jin, what's up? James, LASH, not preload. The ASA, yeah, but the ASA is not a stock cam though. That's an aftermarket cam. Richard, first time here after enjoying your channel for years. I'm a Rover V8 guy. Very cool. Welcome. Waiting for a try. That other guy sometimes. I've only seen one Rover V8 that I ever really wanted to try because it had the cool supercharger on it, and it would have been cool to run that if it was. I don't even know if it was a runner or not. I just walked over there because it had the blower on it. Would you recommend a next gen 7875? Yes. I don't think you need to go to a 410 or a 373 if it's in a car, especially if you have a truck that has big tires on it. You might think about that, but otherwise, I don't think I would. And by default, the Buick aluminum V8 guy. Have you ever had an issue with ARP studs? I haven't. After lifting heads due to my poor tuning skills, put a set of in my aluminum 5.3 today. One of the small studs had no threads on the block side of the stud. The little ones that go where the intake goes, I haven't seen that. I accidentally ordered non-hardened push rods. The TR8 had a little V8 in it. Was it the 215? Yeah, that's what I thought. The shape of things that win. Or was that that was the Triumph. So which one did you guys like more, the TR7, TR8 body or the Fiat X19? X19? I like the TR7s and TR8s and the TR6s. I do too. I was actually looking for a TR6 before I sold my Camaro split bumper and ended up buying a 260Z, mostly because I wanted something that I could put. I wanted an inline 6-cylinder that I could put side drafts on. Good reason to get a car. So I was looking. I had seen one, and I like the TR6s anyway. I'm kind of glad that I didn't get it because I didn't know nearly enough about cars to know that I would have had to do what I'm sure I would have had to done on that TR6. The Z was actually much easier to work on, although I made lots of mistakes. Snapped a camshaft on one. Sunbeam Tiger. That's not part of the list. So Stuart, TA did your modular heads? Tosh, I think the Fiat X19 was a distant cousin of the 308. The Scorpion was cool though, and I actually like the Fiat X19. It just needed a like a turbo. It needed like the MR2 motor in it. Mark, I want to try Rhodes lifters again in something else. Not again. I want to try Rhodes lifters in something modern. The Fiat X19 compares better to the Porsche. The 914 maybe than the X19 and the 914. I don't think it would compare to any other Porsche. And then if you're really a Triumph aficionado, you'd know what a Triumph TR250 is. TR4 and then a TR250 and then a TR6. I don't know if it was a TR250 or just a 250. I think it's TR250. Go with a genuine Borg. The 7875 isn't as durable. Snapped a cam. Yeah, I snapped a cam doing something dumb and bent all the valves also. Jensen Interceptor, yeah. Big Chrysler V8s in those. And other stuff too, I'm told. I thought that they were Chrysler stuff, but all right, Java, get some sleep, man. Aftermarket from TA Performance in the States. Is it a 4.6.2 valve that you're talking about, or a 4.6.4 valve? Because the only aftermarket heads that are available for the modular Ford are TFS. I'll see a TR6 with the SHO Taurus motor. That would be cool. Alex, thank you. Welcome. TR6 had that nice inline 600. It did. A GT6, yep. T150. Shims are put on the rocker stands. Have you ever designed or machined your own cams? I haven't machined them. I've chosen the specs on them, if you mean by that. Working on an uncommon engine that would benefit from a choppier cam. What I would recommend somebody looking for a camshaft is look at something that has a similar displacement and hopefully head configuration, and then look at cams that might be available on something that's, where guys are making stuff for it, and then see what they're running. Richard, how do you adjust pushrod length to ensure that your retainers hit the guides? The retainers. All right, should there be a don't in there somewhere? Adjusting it so the retainers don't hit the seals or the guides is very important, but that's really just lift. TR6 is a proper sports car. It is. I like those. Although a bug-eyed Sprite would be cool, especially with a rotary in it. Will it be possible to get 160 wheel horsepower NA with a... You should, out of a 1.8 liter, 160 wheel horsepower should be pretty easy. I mean, that's GSR territory, basically. Triumph Spitfire is also good. If you have fit Ks in the X19s, that would be fun. Because it would have twice as much horsepower as the X19 engine did. E90 or C16 for boot. They both work well. We run for the Big Bang stuff. We went with 118 octane stuff. And I'm not sure. I'm kind of on the fence about running. Maybe a racing E85 like that would be better. It probably would make more power. Why does it seem carbs almost always use lower LSA than fuel injection? We've discussed this many times. I think that stemmed from early on in fuel injection not being able to adjust to reversion and stuff that goes on with some of these camshafts that have tighter LSAs, mostly at idle and part throttle. But any modern fuel injection can easily do that, and because it has adjustability. But on factory stuff, it was much more difficult to tune that. And carburetors, because you could tune them, everybody could tune them. And I think that's just continued. Because quite honestly, I would bet a guy that's really sharp at tuning probably could get a better idle with fuel injection than he could with a carburetor. Bug-eyed Sprite with a small V8, that would be cool. Was your Dank, you watched the video on LS pushrod length? I used an adjustable pushrod until I got 1.5 turns. Did the adjustable pushrod was strong enough for that? Sometimes they want to deflect. High duration versus high lift. What's your question about that? Don't pick one of those. You want to get the right combination of both of those. When you do razor blade rebuilds, you reuse gaskets. I don't normally, on a junkyard LS, I don't normally reuse the head gasket. I guess if I was at the drag strip and I was between rounds and I had to make it work and we couldn't go get one, I would do that. But if I'm taking the head off, put ring gap in it or whatever, and cleaning it, I'll put another head gasket on it. Because normally on real high mileage stuff, when you take them apart, it pulls off sections of the head gasket. So I just replace them. But the other stuff I reuse, other than the head gasket. Richard, something interesting on small block Mopars, they create a rocker shaft shim. Yeah, that makes sense. The Ford had that too for the 5-liter stuff. Richard, if I had adjustable rocker tips on an LS engine, would it be possible to adjust the hydraulic lifter all the way to the bottom and back it off 15 thousandths and be able to run it like that? Not with just the adjustable rocker. Is not going to get you there. I don't know how much. I don't know how much. Are you adjusting the cup side of it? I don't know how the tip's going to be adjustable. I don't think I've seen that before. Usually either the cup is adjustable or you put a stud on it and then adjust the rocker, the whole rocker. But otherwise, no. Usually you have to be in the range of geometry to get that to happen. James, if that's a stick car, I would go with the smaller one. What's the limit of stock LS push rods? Is it RPM, valve spring? I honestly don't know. We've run it at more than 7,000 RPM, and we've run it with boost. So I don't know. The stock push rods are actually hardened. They're not as strong as an aftermarket one is, but they're strong enough for lots of stuff. V18C5 and early mini, that would be cool. I keep the boost below 20 psi, make 400. That should all be doable based on what's going on with SR20s and Honda motors. James, that thing only has a 3-inch downpipe? Let's see. Mr. Garcia, I don't know what your question is. Justin, heads cam and intake LS1 or cam 6.2 for daily driver. The cam 6.2 will make a lot more power than a heads cam intake 5.7 will. It'll make a lot more low speed power too. Not a lot, but it'll make more. A cam 6-liter can easily make 550 to 575. A heads cam intake LS1 is going to be hard pressed to do that, especially with a stock bottom end. Ever tried out the BTR rocker shaft kit? I think I've run the comp one. But again, when do you need that? At what RPM and stuff? Richard, without your Big Bang 3.8-liter build series, I'd never have slapped the GT45. Slapped the GT45 instead of my 62-1, my 3800, swapped into a Geo Metro. That's very cool. LS3 heads on a 6-liter, yes. Spool up and be way slow with a 1.25 on a stick shift. How many PSI does the power boost formula hold up to? Seems like power tapers off after 25 pounds. The power would only taper off if the turbo or turbos are tapering off. If you have everything right and you have enough turbo to support your power level and you have enough octane and you have enough cooling, it continues to go. James, you should, if you're running that on the 7875, you should step that 3-inch. It's probably a 3-inch V-band flange. You should step that up. You should taper that up immediately to at least 3.5 and maybe to 4 if you can. Turbo sensor, you will. I mean, if you a head that flows like a B series head and something that has like Type R-ish kind of cam specs in it, and that sort of intake-ish deal should make that power. I mean, that's what they do. The Honda isn't magic in that. If it has enough head flow and it has enough, decent intake manifold and has the cam timing, they make that kind of power. The thing that a Nissan won't have that the Honda does is it also has the smaller cam, so it's going to be more responsive. But you should be able to make that power. And then when you make that NA power, then you add boost to it and magic things happen. So when does turbo power get so high that responsiveness is horrible? The turbo power itself doesn't. The power doesn't, but the turbo sizing can. You can have the thing be oversized. Like if you were to put a turbo that's capable of making 1,500 horsepower, but you're wanting 1,500 horsepower from a 1.5 liter motor, it's not going to be that responsive. And that's an extreme example, but every other example is, kind of in between there. I don't, Garcia, I don't know what you mean by thoughts. You got to rephrase your question. Anybody know if the stock TBI ECU in a 95 Chevy pickup will handle the extra cubic inches of a 383 without leaning out? You're going to have to supply it more fuel. So you're going to have to tune it to tell it to give that thing more fuel. It's not going to do that by itself. Stock LQ4 with TSP chop monster cam. Should I use a stock length push rods or measure? You should always measure just to make sure. I don't know what the base circle is on the Texas Speed stuff. Richard, did you test an extreme energy cam on the Dodge? I have not. I didn't. I don't remember. I'd have to look and see what cam we tested. Now that I say that, I want to know what camshaft we put in there. So we did test something, not on mine, but we tested it on the one that Westech has. Dodge results. 360 Magnum. Headers. Nitrous. File test description. So we ran a Comp 264R-14 cam. It was a 212, 218, and 480 lift is the camshaft that we ended up running. And it made 350 horsepower and 418 foot-pounds of torque. Do they make bigger injectors for the TBI? The big block ones are the biggest ones, unless there are. Does anybody know if there are aftermarket versions of the throttle body injectors? Richard, how is spool affected 2.5 inch versus 3.5 inch downpipe? The 3.5 inch downpipe will spool much better than a 2.5. Using a dual plane on an LS with a Holley Terminator Stealth. Should I use an open spacer? The spacer is up to you. You have to test it to see if it's responsive to your combination. James, yep. Preload half turn to 1.5 turns. Did you discuss why different manufacturers have such a wide range of lifter preload, 50 to 100,000? No, we weren't discussing lifter changes. We were discussing choosing the right pushrod length. And the biggest change is between a standard travel lifter and a short travel lifter. Let's see. How critical is it that lifter bore diameter and surface finish? The internal finish of this lifter is critical. It's ultra critical. I think they made upgraded TBIs. The big blocks were definitely bigger than the small blocks. I just don't know if they made bigger than the big block ones. And again, if you're putting that on a 383, you're going to have to tune it. You have to change the fueling on it, and probably the timing as well. Torque and beans going from a 7.4 inch push rod to a 7.395. I would be surprised if it changed anything. 5 thousandths is nothing. We're talking about changing it 50 thousandths. We're talking about changing it going from a 7.4 to a 7.35 or 7.30 or 7.45. And if you really want to get fancy, you measure all of them, see if they're different. I don't know, for some reason. It's not going to change it that much. Look at you guys can all take a look at the push rod length video that I have, and you can see how much power we got from changing fairly, I mean, like 100 thousandths change in push rod length. You can see what kind of power we got. So you have an idea on what it's like. People are going to come in and say, yeah, but if you would have got what if it's a bell curve? What if you had no change over there and no change over here, but if you did a little bit of a change and it's all huge, like people said with the gap and all that stuff? I'm like, no, it's not that. What's your opinion on Napier's second rings? I don't know that I have never done a test on a change in ring design on a boosted engine. I've only done gap. Little John always says the best downpipe for a turbo is no downpipe. I don't agree with that. I know what John's trying to say, but we're saying the same thing. You need maximum flow after the turbo, but no downpipe probably is not going to work that well. Actually, having a pipe, I would argue that the turbo flows better with having a pipe, some kind of pipe, a short one. But he's saying the right thing. You want all of the flow on that side of the turbo. Richard, you ever run across any 2.2 T2 cars in the auto wreckers? No, I've only ever seen one turbocharged 2.2 car in all of my days of going there, and it was a T1. It was an 84, and I have the motor. It's the one that's up on the dyno. I didn't measure, just got an SS2 kit that came with pack springs and push rods. Okay. Jonathan, is that on the Dodge? What about wear on a preloaded valve train? But every factory motor that's a hydraulic roller has preloaded valve train. Maybe 7,350 is what he meant when he told me. might be. Although I've been told that on the factory stuff that, oh no, it's not 7.4. It's actually 7.395 or 7 or whatever the last decimal point. I'm like, look, we're splitting hairs here. 3,000s change or even 5,000 change. You're gonna probably have 3,000. You might have 3,000 change just in variants of the push rod when they're building the push rods, because it's hard to get them that precise, because they're not building race engines. These push rods are not for race engines. They probably have some variants there. Richard, when you did the comp HRT stage 2 cam with the 5.7 Hemi, was it a stock bottom end installed straight up? Yes, it was installed straight up. Some says too big for a stock bottom end. We'll have piston to valve clearance. I don't remember measuring piston to valve clearance on that, but I did run that camshaft, And I thought that we did it on a stock piston to valve motor. Steve Morris recommends a Napier second ring. You probably should listen to Steve. He's a pretty sharp guy. What's the ideal compression ratio for high boost applications on ethanol fuel? There's no ideal compression ratio. Can you make a video on turbo pipe sizing, CID to pipe diameter ratio? That's not a thing. It's not, it wouldn't be cubic inch. It wouldn't be displacement. And are you talking about the turbo piping going from the head to the Y pipe to the turbo, or the turbo piping after the turbo? Which one of those are you talking about? The compression ratio question, there's not an ideal one. If guys that are building dedicated race motors, especially guys that are building dedicated race motors that have to run in a specific class, and so they're limited in the size of the turbo that they can run, they have very, very high static compression, because higher compression just makes more power. But they're also really, really good at the way that they tune the motor. So they can run 12-1 or 13-1 and still run lots of boost, because a lot of those guys are running methanol anyways. So they can get away with that. So the question isn't that. The question is, how do you make the power that you need to make for the thing that you're trying to do? So if you tell us what it is you're trying to do and what kind of combination you're trying to put together, we can give you a fairly good idea on how to make the power that you want to make. And it might not be the highest compression and the boost. And are you asking, since you're mentioning ethanol fuel, are you asking what's the balance between detonation threshold on high boost and low compression, and then the reverse of that? Hood exit Honda turbos seem to change the response, like some kind of scavenging effect. So you think that the flow over the hood is drawing exhaust gases out? Thinking man, yeah, I thought that the big blocks were bigger, were flow more. Scott, why are you wanting to run solid rollers on it? Jonathan, that happens too. If you sink the valves in them, you can change the push rod length as well. I've seen extreme examples of that. BTR stated he preferred not to exceed 10.5-1 with boost because it narrows the tuning window. Yeah, we've commented on that many, many times here. That's what we talk about, is the gain that you get from going higher in static compression. You narrow the tuning window, and so unless you're really, really good at what you're doing, the potential gain that you get, because when you go from, if you add a full point of compression, you get about 3 or 4% of NA power, not 3 or 4% of boosted power, because that'd be kind of nice. That'd be a good deal. But you get 3 or 4% of the NA power gain, but you are a lot closer to detonation now. So in my opinion, that's not normally worth it. I would look somewhere else. I would look at more head flow or cam timing or intake manifold, and the thing is, all of that's going to be turbo related. If you have 1,000 horsepower turbo, you're going to make the 1,000 horsepower if you turn it up to the right spot. Hard and maximum boost for a 4302 without ring gap. Oh, I should know. Let me know. Good luck with that. I don't recommend you running any boost without ring gap. Having said that, I've done it before, but I don't recommend it. I was saying that conventional downpipes rob power and curve compared to hood exits. Yeah, that no, and I'm not saying that you weren't right. I wondered if that was the case. I'd like to kind of see, because like if you slash cut it and you have a hood deal and you have enough flow over the hood, does that help it? I don't know, because you'd have probably have a low pressure if you were far enough back on the hood, like in the middle, probably you probably would have a low pressure zone right at the hood. Although you might have, I'd like to see the pressure gradient off of the hood at speed to see what's going on there. But what I think what you're talking about there is just size. So if it's bigger coming out of the turbo, bigger and shorter, definitely going to flow more than a full downpipe. Does header tubing size and pipe diameter affect spool timing? Are you talking about ignition timing or the spool rate? It can. So we'll let Richard use a wind tunnel. Freiburg got to use it, which I thought was really cool. Richard, you have access to a flow bench. Yeah, Westec has one. So I'm gonna turn our poll off at 70% saying yes, they have adjusted valves or pushrod length. 30% saying no. Yeah, James, I flowed a lot of stuff. Lots and lots of cylinder heads and stuff. It's funny, after I build all these adjustable intake manifolds, all of the like head porter guys and all the flow guys, well, what do they flow? I'm like, don't have any idea. Here's what they did on power, though. I can show you that. Yeah, what does it flow? I don't know. I don't know if it's more than a stock one. I don't know if it's less than a stock one. I know it makes more power. Oh, Gene, you want the 24-hour babysitting? I know. I need to put that together. What do you think about 317 heads with boost? I think they work well. Every LS head works well with boost. Every LS head is a boosted head. If I was putting a turbo on an LS, I would put it on the heads that I have on the LS that I have. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't upgrade from a 317, which is going to be the least powerful head. I wouldn't put a 706 in place of that. I wouldn't put a 799 unless I already had them laying around and I was taking the motor apart to put ring gap in it because I was going to put boost in it. Then I might switch the heads. But if I was trying to drive around and run on pump gas, I probably would run the 317s. What does it flow? Air. And you should see the flow guys get so mad. Like, how do you not know what a flow is? Well, how did you port match it? Did you taper it? I'm like, stop. You're talking about doing all that stuff because you want it to make power. And I'm showing you that it made power. So we've skipped over all the things that you're talking about and gone right to the answer. Looking for a solid lifter clatter. Oh, so you want the noise. So you want the chop and the chop noise. And then now, Scott, I mean, not to throw you under the bus, but if you're going to have all of that, you also should have a Pete Jackson gear drive. You might as well have that noise too. What's the highest horsepower you've seen on ported 317 is? Around 1,500 horsepower, but they'll support way more than that. That's just where we ran into the limit of the stock bottom end. Now, you can make 2,000 horsepower with them, although what you're going to run into is not a flow rate or a power production problem. You're going to run into the fact that those have stock deck thicknesses, and so you're going to distort the head because they're stock heads like all the rest of them. That's what happens, Sam. Too many questions, too many answers, too many, and that is a problem. When you have too many choices, it can be problematic. Christopher just might not say that to David Vizard. Might not say what. I like David. He's a good guy. I talk to him. I don't talk to him as much as I want to, but I have talked to him several times. I mean, lifter bore in the block. Yeah, I'm not that concerned about the lifter bore in the block. A little flex hone will clean it up. Have you tested a pair of VS 7875s? No, I've tested a pair of S475s, and it's going to be a very similar thing. Can you tune misfire into an idle misfire? You can put chop in it, yeah. Oh, Christopher, yeah, you were talking about the flow rate stuff. Yeah, I know. There are some things I don't say to Dave. I don't think he would like every cam's a turbo cam. Ron, you got the Hemi book? Cool. Richard, are there any stock LS castings that flow 390 CFM once ported? Yes. I think guys can get that. You certainly can get that from the LS7 heads. Going to be checking pushrod length for the first time tomorrow. See, there you go. Yeah, so and especially if you're new here, so that you know, if you ask a question, don't have the word thoughts in it. I don't know what you mean by thoughts. You have to be specific about your question. If you have a question about something specific, ask that. But thoughts is way too general, so don't ask that. I don't like that. It's triggering. Air to water versus methanol fuel. We've talked about that many times. You should have both, because you'll make more power with an air to water with methanol fuel than you will with just methanol fuel by itself. Can you get 380 CFM out of a ported LS3 head? I know that the aftermarket ones will go there, and some of the aftermarket ones will probably go to 400 or more. And on that note, it is time to go. You guys keep me here too late, always. And it's nighttime. But I will be back tomorrow morning. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you tomorrow.